Hello and welcome, my Synthwaver friends. Alonso here from synthwavedojo.com. Thank you very much for being here. I think this is the first time that I'm going to be streaming at night, at least in the Americas night. Cool, so today we have a great session. I'm going to be showing you how to create the gated reverb drums effect, which was very popular in the 80s and had its resurgence in the last decade. Alright, so let's see, before we get into the nitty-gritty, a couple of things that I wanted to mention. First is that if you haven't done so already, head over to synthwavedojo.com/downloads, actually /events, so you can find all our upcoming classes, masterclasses, and any kind of event that we're offering. On that page, you can sign up to receive email alerts, and also you can add any events that you see there directly into your calendar of choice to receive reminders and all that great stuff. Cool, with that out of the way, let's get into today's session. I will be taking a look at the chat from time to time and answering any questions that pop up. First thing, a little history lesson. So let's head over to Wikipedia and read up on gated reverb. This is the entry right there, and it says that gated reverb is an audio processing technique that combines strong reverb and a noise gate. This is important. We need a noise gate for this technique to work well. And it's one of the more prominent effects in many pop and rock songs of the 1980s. It was brought to mainstream attention in 1979 by producers Steve Lillywhite and engineer Hugh Padgham, while working on a Peter Gabriel album. Afterward, this is important as well, Phil Collins used this technique on one of his tracks, and this is where it really exploded after that. And that's the quintessential drum fill that Phil Collins plays on In the Air Tonight. That's like the best example out there of gated reverb. And the effect is typically applied to recordings of drums. This is also important. Okay, we apply it to shells. Shells are the kick, the snare, and the toms. Metals, such as rides, crashes, and hi-hats, are typically not sent to a gated reverb, only drums. And you can also experiment with other percussion, such as bongos, congas, and claps. They can certainly benefit a lot from the gated reverb effect. Now, it says that it's applied to recordings of drums to make the hits sound powerful and punchy while keeping the overall mix clean and transparent sounding. This is also important because size or reverb gives us the impression of the drum or whatever sound source to be in a very big room. However, if you use a huge reverb, it's going to have a huge tail. So as you play your drums, the reverb tails are going to smear all the drum hits. So you get one thing, which is size, but then you lose clarity in your mix. So gated reverb, it gives you the best of both worlds. You can create like a very bombastic and huge reverb sound, but by keeping it super short, then you can use it on pretty much any production without muddying up or smearing the transients and all the other drum hits. Cool. It says, unlike many reverberation or delay effects, the gated reverb effect does not try to emulate any kind of reverb that occurs in nature. Okay, this is also important. So we're not really trying to emulate like a hall or a room or anything. Once we get into this, I'll show you that starting with a plate reverb, it's a great starting point, and you want the reverb to be as smooth as possible. That's why plates tend to be so good for this. Alrighty, history lesson over. Let's dive into the DAW. Great. I'm going to be walking you through today a lot of examples. I'm going to show you how to apply gated reverb to a snare. I'm going to show you how to apply it to a kick, how to apply it to toms, and how to apply it to snare, kick, and toms all at the same time. And just bear with me, because the routing of accomplishing this or this reverb, gated reverb technique can be a little complicated. Things may be called differently in your DAW, so I'm going to try to explain as I go, but just be warned that there's some complex routing up ahead, and I'll try to explain as easily or as simply as I can. Cool. So we have this very simple drum pattern. Okay, kick, snare, and a tom fiddle that happens every 2 bars. Cool. For now, I'm gonna mute the kick and the toms. So all that remains is the snare. Okay, and it doesn't matter what drum samples you're using. Pretty much anything, any drum sound will work. Cool. So the first thing that we're going to do for the gated reverb effect and setting it up in a way that's the most flexible is in your DAW, you have to instantiate or create an aux track, an effects track, or a return track, depending on how it's called in your DAW. But in essence, it's a track like this where I can instantiate any effect that I want, such as reverb or delay. And from my main channel, or let's say from my main sound, such as the snare, I'm not routing my snare 100% into this effects track. I'm just using a send to send a little bit of the signal here. So my snare, my kick, and my toms are still going to another bus that I have, how I have it set up in my DAW, which is using a drum bus. So again, this effects track only has the whatever effects I'm going to use, and I send a little bit of my signal into this effects track. Okay, so this effects track, I'm going to call it snare gated reverb, just to make it very clear and obvious as I'm working through the examples and looking at all of this, which can get a little messy. So the first thing that we're going to do is fire up a reverb. In this case, I'm just using Valhalla Vintage Verb with a 1980s color, 4.4 seconds of decay. Let's set it to 0 pre-delay, mix 100%. This is important. Since I'm sending a little bit of my signal into this effects track, the plugin, the reverb plugin, I have to set it at 100%. So no dry signal comes from the snare gated reverb, only the wet signal. Cool. And this is how it sounds. Okay. Nice sound. Super long. Okay. That's a great start. And I'm not getting too technical about any of the settings, just that I'm using a smooth plate, not a room and not a hall. You can experiment with that later, and just setting it very long. And up to a certain point, or beyond a certain point, it doesn't matter if I set it to 4 seconds or 20 seconds, because I'm gonna cut off the tail with a gate. So a good place to start is, let's say, 4 seconds. That's gonna work just fine. Once again, that's our sound. All right. The next thing, we're gonna set up or instantiate a gate plugin after the reverb. Because I have a lot of other stuff that I'm gonna show you, my gate is not exactly or right after the reverb, but that's fine. So here's my gate. I am going to enable the gate. I'm gonna set this back to the default state. Okay. And the way that we're going to set up the gate is we have an attack, hold, and release parameters. The attack, typically 1 to 5 milliseconds, will work well. The reduction range, this is how much the gate is going to reduce the signal that is outside of the threshold. So anywhere 40 minus 40 dB is going to work just fine. The hold parameter, let's set it for now to 80 milliseconds. And the release parameter, let's set it to 50 milliseconds. And the hold and the release, we're going to tweak them in a bit and time them to the subdivisions and the tempo of our track. Okay. I'm gonna raise the threshold completely, and no reverb is coming through. So the reverb is cutting everything off. So I'm going to start lowering my threshold until I can hear the reverb coming through. Somewhere around here, that's fine. And I'm not looking at the values, I'm just listening to when the reverb is coming through. Great. Next thing I'm gonna do to really get good control over the gate. Right now the gate is analyzing the reverb signal that's in front of it. So this reverb is feeding into the gate, and the gate is reacting to the reverb, to the amplitude and the length of the reverb. But I don't want that. I want the gate to only listen to the snare dry signal so I can have more control relating to how I can make the hold and the release time shorter or sharper. Great. So the way to do that, your gate plugin has to have a key or sidechain feature. Most of them do. So you have to, again, figure out in your DAW how to activate the sidechain feature in your gate plugin, and then route the snare dry signal into the gate sidechain or feed it into the sidechain. So in my case, in Presonus Studio One, I'm just gonna activate this button that says sidechain, and here I'm gonna select what source I'm going to feed into my gate sidechain. And I had already prepared this, and you see that the snare, I've created a send that is feeding into my gate. Cool. With this enabled, now I have much better control on the hold and release parameters. Again, because the gate is now reacting to the snare dry signal and not to the reverb. And a cool thing that we can do with this is I'm gonna head over to a web page where I have a delay and reverb time calculator already displayed, and you can find lots of websites and tools like this online. Just look up, search in Google, delay and reverb time calculator, or at the end of the Synthwave Dojo, Synthwave Composer tools, free PDF, which you can get at synthwavedojo.com/downloads. At the end, there's a section called reference, and you'll find the link to that tool, to this tool there. And here, what's very cool is that I'm gonna input in the tempo of my track, which is 104. So let me just refresh this thing. Okay, I'm gonna say, or input in 104 BPM, and it's gonna give me the delay lengths in milliseconds for all the subdivisions that I'm looking for. And this is important because the parameters in my gate and in most all gate plugins out there are displayed in milliseconds, not in subdivisions of the beat. When you fire up a delay plugin and you sync it to the tempo of your track, those will display subdivisions such as 1/4, 1/8, 16th notes, whatever, but the gate doesn't. So in order for me to know, okay, if I want to set the length of the hold to a quarter note or 16th note, how do I do that? How many milliseconds is that? Then that's what I'm going to find right here. Okay, so for example, let's start with a quarter note value. This says that the quarter note value at this tempo is 577 milliseconds. Okay, the hold pattern, the hold parameter, what it says in the gate is once a signal has breached the threshold, okay, the attack is going to take 5 milliseconds to have the gate act on it, and the gate, or this hold parameter, is going to keep the gate open for the time length that I've selected here. So the gate is going to be open, in this case, for 577 milliseconds. And once that closes, the release parameter, what it gives us is how sharp or how steep the closing of the gate is going to be. Great. So here I set the hold parameter to 577 milliseconds, which equals a quarter note. Let me unmute the kick. you can hear that the gate is closing before the next kick hit when it's on a downbeat quarter note, obviously. Okay, and the release, it's very sharp, like it's a vacuum sucking in the sound. But if I give it more release time, it's going to be more gradual, softer. You can hear it right there. Super sharp, steep, open and close super quick, like this. Gradual, softer. And one of these is not better than the other. These are just colors or options that you have. If you want the snare, the gated reverb to be super obvious and aggressive like that, like with a really super fast release time, then that's great. If you want it more gradual, then give it a little bit more release. And both options are great. And obviously all the range of options that you have in between the super slow and super fast. All right. So let's set it at 15 milliseconds. So it's fast, but not that fast. Cool. Now from here, we can mix in with the snare gate reverb fader how much of the reverb I want to hear in my production. Because it can be very subtle, like this, or super obvious and over the top. Cool. Now, another thing is we timed the gate to a quarter note value. Let's make it shorter. For example, 1/8 or 1/16. Let's go for 1/16. So that's going to be 144 milliseconds. There we go. Huge difference. I could push it up in the mix. And of course, it's less obvious and less intrusive as a full quarter note. It gives the impression of size from the reverb, but by cutting it short, you can use it. And we could double this value to get to an 1/8 note length. And all of these are great choices. Experiment with the one to find the one that you like. On certain productions, certainly if you have a faster tempo, let's say this one's at 104, maybe upwards of 120, 130, you would do better in going with shorter time parameters for the hold and the release. However, if you have a super slow track or medium tempo, let's say in the 80 to 90 BPM range, where you have more space to fill, then you could even try, if not a quarter note, then maybe like a half note or something, right? The slower the track, the more space that you can fill up, so you can elongate the hold and release times. But in a faster track, or where you have a busier arrangement, then make the reverb gate time faster. Cool. Next thing that I want to show you is, so this is the first technique, or the traditional, where again, you set up an effects track, you instantiate a reverb of 4 milliseconds, 4 seconds actually of length, try out a smooth plate, and after it, you're going to set up a gate that is being fed in the sidechain by the snare, and we can tweak these parameters to our taste, or to our bad taste, if you will. This is one option. Now, another option that I want to show you is there are certain reverbs that have a what's called a non-lin, as in non-linear algorithm, which helps us get this sound, but without using the gate and setting up the sidechain and all of this. So it's like a quicker way to get to the same example or to the same result. So I'm gonna deactivate the gate. Okay, and I have a nonlinear example here. I'm using again Valhalla Vintage Verb because it has a nonlin algorithm in here. Maybe you had this plugin and didn't know what this algorithm was for. That happened to me. I had it for like 2 years before I noticed that it had this nonlin. So now the parameters change a little bit, but now that I have activated it, you can hear that it has a very sharp cutoff. With a couple of controls, I can tweak this to my taste. So I can make it longer. And with this other control, it's kind of like the release where I can set the cutoff or the closing of the gate to be super sharp or a little softer. And unfortunately, because this reverb is showing me percentages of size, I don't know, it doesn't show me milliseconds. If I wanted to set my gate time to a quarter note or a 16th note or an 8th note, I couldn't do it by reading any of the values here. So I would have to kind of tweak it by ear or get it to a point where I like it. For example, here it's very short, but it's cool. And we can play with how much of the reverb we want in our pattern. Just a little bit or a lot. Now, if you're giving your snare a lot of reverb like this, what you can also do is lower both the level of your snare and the gated reverb faders so they feel like they are behind the kick to give even a little bit more of an impression of size or of the snare being behind the kick. Because right here, you can't have a dry kick with such a reverby sound source beside it. The kick would out in nature would have a lot of reverb too. Okay, so to kind of solve for that, we can reduce the level of the reverb and have it feel or be heard behind the kick. If you're going for something more realistic. And of course, you don't. It's all up to you. Excellent. So this is non-linear algorithms in a reverb. It'll get you there faster. This is not the only one that has that. I'm sure plenty of other reverb plugins out there have that in the market. But again, it's a very quick way to get your gated reverb sound going. Awesome. Next up, showed you the reverb and gate, the standard technique, non-lin. Okay, I want to show you another specialty plugin that's called 80 Spaces, which also helps us get this kind of sound with way less hassle. This one has an inbuilt gate feature. So let me activate the plugin. You can set whatever preset we want. There's a few of them that are pretty cool, already labeled 80s toms, Mr. Collins, Phil Toms, drum machine, snare. Any of these would certainly work, even though they are labeled as toms presets. Let's see, long 80s snare. This is super long, but by turning the gate and the decay, I can make it shorter. It has too much pre-delay for my taste. Okay, this one also has a millisecond value, so I could tune it to my subdivisions. But I'm not going to do that. I already showed you how to do it. Cool. Easy peasy. Again, gets us there super quick. In this plugin, 80 Spaces, I really like it. It has convolution impulses, or let's say it emulates a few very classic reverbs from the 80s. And it's made by Nomad Factory, and you can get it. The list price is like $199, but very often, like every 2 months or so, if you go to the Morevox website or check out the Nomad Factory, they put it on sale like for $30. Again, like every 2 to 3 months. So it's worth it to check that website often and get this plugin for $30. It's a steal because it's really, really cool. It's got a lot of flexibility. It's got some EQ and some other stuff that I'll show you later. But for now, very cool. You can use a plugin like this to get that sound faster. Alrighty, so I've shown you how to apply gated reverb to your snare. We can apply it also to the kick and to the toms separately. Now I'm going to show you how to do that. Let's get rid of this. Let me activate the reverb here. Actually, before I show you the kick, there's one more very cool trick that I want to show you with the snare. And it is, instead of applying reverb to your snare, we can apply a reverb made from white noise, which is a very interesting sound. And if you pay attention, I'm sure that you've heard it on many other records from the 80s, and a lot of synthwave and retrowave producers use this, and you may not have identified it, recognized it, or not know how to make it happen. So here's the gist of that. I'm gonna set up a new effects track, aux track, return track, however it's called in your DAW. Have to find out, figure it out. And I'm going to instantiate a tone generator. Just gonna bring it down. This tone generator generates white noise, pink noise, and all sorts of tones for testing and for different purposes. In this case, we're gonna use the white noise. Okay. After this white noise, I'm gonna set up a gate. And just like I showed you with the setting up the gate for the reverb, I'm gonna send the snare into the sidechain of this gate. And I'm gonna do this so the gate opens and we hear the white noise only when the snare hits. Without the gate, that white noise is constant, but with the gate, it's closed, silent, until a snare hit comes through, like this. And it has a very cool character because it doesn't sound like a room, doesn't sound like a hall, it doesn't sound like a plate. It's like very sparkly, very clean. You could apply chorus or flange or something to make it even more sparkly. Okay, and just as we did with the reverb, we can play with this sound, make it longer or shorter, time it to our subdivisions. The same deal. Okay, I see that my snare is feeding the sidechain. And then use however much I want. So it's like a sparkly sound, like a splash of white noise, a burst of white noise. Not reverb per se. So this is pretty cool. This is a pretty cool technique. And we can take it even one step further and send this white noise into a reverb. So now we get a reverbed white noise. And the same as with the other techniques, now we need a second gate after the reverb. So here we have a another Valhalla vintage verb after my white noise tone generator. But obviously it's super big, and now it's smearing all my pattern, all my drums. So we place a gate behind it. And this gate, the sidechain, is being fed by the snare as well. So let's set this up. I'm not hearing the white noise come through, so I'm going to review that my sends are active. Oh, lo and behold, here in my snare, this sidechain send is not active. Like I said at the beginning, there's some pretty complex routing going on here, so you have to be like very focused and be very careful about what you're doing. Okay. Now this is a reverbed white noise with a gate. Sounds pretty cool. And it's different from sending the snare into the reverb. So this is another very cool technique. Awesome. And the final thing that I want to mention before we head over to working on the kicks, like I said, this was going to be a super valuable session. There's a lot of stuff that I'm showing, that I'm throwing your way. So I really hope that if you're not taking notes, that you watch this afterward and try all of this in your DAW, because this one is chock full of greatness. Great stuff, guys. Okay, the final thing that I want to show you is using a mono reverb for this technique. Hey, Phil K82, what's up? I see there that you have a question about chords. Send it there in the chat and I'll see when to answer the question. Any and all questions are welcome. Cool. So, up until now, I've only showed you stereo reverb on our gated reverb effect. However, we can set up and use a mono reverb. In this case, we have this Valhalla plate plugin. Let me check the gates and all of this. Okay, my snare gate verb FX track is muted. Again, I really have to be very careful with what I'm doing here. Okay, this reverb can go from wide stereo to mono with this control. Now let's gate this thing. Cool. It works. If you listen to tracks from the 80s, you will find examples of gated reverb that's stereo, and in other cases, it's mono. So you have those two choices. Those are two different colors. Of course, mono is less intrusive than stereo. If you have a thicker arrangement, a thicker track with a lot of stuff going on, maybe other gated reverbs on your toms, on your kick, definitely pick mono instead of stereo to see if it can help you clear up some space, or just have this as a tool in your arsenal because it's a different flavor. And finally, after the reverb and before your gate, it's wise to set up an EQ so we can tweak the sound of the reverb. Many times, these reverbs add a lot of bass to the final sound. They have bass multipliers, and then they have, or maybe a lot of high frequencies. So if you can smoothen some of the high frequencies and remove low frequencies, that's really gonna help you, because you don't need that in the reverb necessarily, right? So be very conscious about that. So in this case, I just set here a FabFilter Pro Q3, and what I've done is set up a high pass filter to get rid of all low frequencies below 100 Hertz, and also a low pass to get rid of all high frequencies above 6.5K. And what this makes is my reverb a little darker. And sometimes reverbs that have too much high end, they sound cheap. And without the high pass filter, check out all this low frequency that's being introduced into our mix, and we don't want that. This is gonna take away a lot of clarity, introduce muddiness, and make things very difficult to mix come mix time. So So it's a good practice to EQ your reverb to take away a lot of the stuff that you don't need. And also, for example, if you want your reverb to be less intrusive or less noticeable, not only can you play with the level, but also take away high frequencies so they don't stick out. It's gonna feel like they are behind the band, which is also a very cool trick. All right, so I think that now we are ready to tackle the kick and the toms finally. Let me get rid of this. Okay. Why would you want to add gated reverb to the kick and to the toms and to the snare on their own or individually instead of as a group? Well, here's the thing. Not always you want to add gated reverb to your kick. Maybe for a certain production it works well. The same as the snare. Maybe you only want to add it to the snare, or maybe only to the toms, and you want the kick and the snare to be more present and not have it. Okay, so you can set up the gated reverb effect on only the sources or the drums that you need. However, if you want to set up gated reverb for your kick and your snare and your toms, it's better to do the same thing that I just showed you, one time for the snare, one time for the kick, and one time for the snare, for the toms, because then you can tweak the levels of all the reverbs, you can tweak the lengths, because for example, the kick, with all those low frequencies, you don't want the kick gated reverb to be too big, especially if your kick pattern has a lot of hits, right? It's gonna muddy up your mix. So that's one thing. You don't want it to be too long. The other thing, you really want to EQ out everything under 100 hertz for the kick. So again, you're not introducing reverberated low frequencies, which are gonna destroy your mix. And then also on the kick, let's say you just want a little bit, but you want more on the snare. Or maybe you want a certain kind of reverb on the kick and a different one on the snare. So you have that flexibility to pick and choose and really adjust and tweak how you want the different reverbs to sound in your production. So I have my kick already set up for this. Okay, so I'm just gonna enable my plugins, the same thing that I just showed you. Smooth plate, 4 seconds, 1980s color. Behind this, well, we have a Pro Q, like I mentioned, to get rid definitely of all frequencies below 100 hertz. I could even go higher. And the gate. And right there, this is a very cool gated reverb sound for the kick. And with the kick, you want to be super careful about the length. If you go for a very long hold time like this, in this case it kind of works, but if my kick pattern is very active, every time the kick hits, is gonna the reverb is gonna smear on all of those kick hits, and it's gonna be a mess. So for a kick, you want to keep it definitely on the short side, possibly a 32nd note or a 64th. In this case, a 32nd note is 72 milliseconds. Let's set this up. What about 36? This works for me. Let's just give it a little bit more release. Listen to the difference between this release and this. On natural, if that's what you're going for, cool. But like this, with a little bit of release, in the 50 to 100 millisecond range, it sounds a little bit more natural. And again, we can mix it in how much we want. You don't want it to be super big like that, because it can destroy your mix. So very judicious. And you can hear long gated reverb on the snare, short gated reverb on the kick. Cool. That's the kick. And also, especially with the kick, try it in mono and using any of the other techniques that I showed you. Non-linear, and what else? A specialty plugin that has an inbuilt gate. All right, moving on. Let's do the same thing with the toms. All right, I'm gonna unmute my toms, mute my kick and snare. Cool. The same thing that I showed you. Effects track specifically for the toms here. Every tom track has a send into the gate, not only into this effects track, but into the sidechain of the gate. Let me get rid of, okay, nothing here is active. Super big, undefined. Let's now activate the gate. I'm using an SSL gate plugin, which has the same features and controls, just looks different. Sounds very cool. Without the gate, very big but washed out, undefined. We activate the kick, activate the gate with the sidechain feature. Here you see that the toms are triggering the sidechain, and we get this 80s Phil Collins glory. Cool. And we can experiment with the size of the length of the hold parameter and tweak the length. Maybe that's too long. This is very short and snappy, very cool. You can hear that the gated reverb is ending before every tom hit, which is cool. If we increase the hold parameter, the reverb is kind of overlapping every tom hit, so it's not as clean, but it's not terrible. At this point, yeah, it's kind of terrible, but here, you have a lot of margin or range to play with. Super short and snappy. And a thing to consider is that on its own, just with the drums soloed, you may hear that, wow, this is a lot of reverb, but once you activate or unsolo the bass and the other elements in your track, all of that eats up the reverb, the clarity of the reverb, so you may have to adjust the send levels again, right? So be aware of that. For example, where did my channels go? Okay, here. Great stuff. You see, we can't hear all that reverb anymore, but it's there. If I were to deactivate all my effects, immediately you would hear that the drums jump forward and sound super dry and unnatural. Cool. All right. And the final thing that I want to show you, let me take a look at my notes. Showed you how to do the toms, and again, explore with the non-linear algorithm for the toms, or using a specialty plugin, using the gated reverb manually like I showed. But there's also another option. What we can do is, let me mute all my reverb effects channels. Now, and obviously this tom pattern is happening way too often. This is just for showing you guys, right? You wouldn't have a pattern that continuously has that annoying feel like every 2 bars. That would be overkill. So the final method that I want to show you is, I have my kick, my snare, and my toms all routed this time. Yeah, the output of these tracks is going to this drum bus. This is different from what I showed you here, where I have a send. So I'm sending a little bit of the signal into these effects channels. This time I'm routing my tracks to the drum bus. Okay, so with this fader, I can control all my drums. Mute, solo, whatever, cool. Now what I'm gonna do, similar to the other techniques, is create an effects channel, set up a reverb with a gate, and I'm going to send from my drum bus into this drums verb channel. So it's a quick and dirty way to do what I showed you. So if you want the individual control of a different length for the kick and different reverbs for the snare and this and that, do them all separately with these effects aux or return tracks, whatever they're called in your DAW. But if you want just a quick and dirty sound that very often works, then you route all your drum shells to a drum bus, instantiate or create an effects channel, and send from your drum bus into this effects channel, and it sounds like this. Great, right? Let me just filter this a little bit. There's a lot of low end that I don't want. Okay, so I'm using the Valhalla Vintage Verb non-lin, so I don't have to use the gate and all of that. And right here, this is a good sound. Quick and dirty. I can mix it in. To be obvious or more subtle. Cool. Once more, if you wanted individual control, like for example on this one, let me just solo this thing. I feel like the kick may be too long. Probably I would like it a little bit shorter, but I think that's fine. That'll work. But if I wanted the kick shorter, then I would go through the complexity of setting it up individually. But that's a very cool sound. Nice. Like I mentioned, you can use this on claps, congas, a bunch of stuff, but not cymbals and medals. All right, let me check my notes, see if there's anything else that I want to cover. Okay, not really. Let me check if there are any questions. Yeah, the white noise technique is very cool. It has a very different character than using a gated reverb. It's much more subtle, like more sparkly. It's like very, very magical, especially if you can apply like some phasing or chorus or flanger, just a little bit, right? Don't go crazy, or go crazy if that's what you want. Could certainly give you a different flavor altogether. All right, I see Phil K82 saying, talking about suspended chords, sevenths in Synthwave, how you use them, passing chords, blah, blah. You're in luck because for next week, I am planning on doing a live stream just like this one, talking about suspended chords, maybe not necessarily sevenths. I think suspended chords, there's a lot to talk about that. So make sure to check synthwavedojo.com/events, or here in the channel, there's a section with upcoming events and live streams. Check that because I'm gonna schedule that for sometime next week. I don't know, maybe Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday. And it's gonna be a full hour only talking about suspended chords, and probably another one later on about sevenths. Alrighty, cool. So that's all I had for today. Let me see any closing remarks. For sure, experiment with all that I showed you today. Again, if you didn't take notes, watch this again and again and try out all the techniques that I showed you. The aux tracks, effects tracks, return tracks, and sends, they're called differently in all DAWs, whether you're using Logic or Ableton or Cubase or Pro Tools. They all call these things differently, so you need to figure out how to do it. And in a way, with enough practice. So if you want to set up gated reverb, boom, you can do it like that, right? You don't have to figure out, okay, so how do I route this thing? Because some of these routings can be very complex, routing the dry signals into the side chains of the gates and this and that. Okay, and experiment and try this in your music. Now, some of it may not fit every track that you make. Maybe one of these techniques is just the thing that you were looking for, but certainly try them all and just get yourself acquainted to the extent that you can really call any of these techniques when you want to. And if it doesn't work, cool, you can undo whatever routing and move on, but really have them like at your disposal. Cool. And let's see what else. It's all up to you in the end. It's about building tools or developing the tools that you put in your tool belt, whether you use them or not. It doesn't matter because you have them there. Alrighty, so I really hope, guys, that you found this useful. Let me know if you have any questions or comments, and I'm gonna see you in the next live stream, just like this one. Keep synthwaving, my synthwaver friends. You have a great night, and we'll talk soon. See ya.